Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin, here with my co-host James Haskell. In this episode, we are going to discuss and react to the most recent Eric DeCosta press conference that was held today at the Combine in Indianapolis. But before we get into that, take a second, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and we will keep you up to date on all your Ravens news. But Jimbo, where should we start when talking about what Eric said today at the Combine?
Yeah, so I think, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of juicy topics, but I think of the three of the topics that he discussed, there are three that have the most meat on the bone. So I think three we'll discuss today are Lamar's contract situation. We'll talk about free agency and their strategy, and we'll talk about the draft. But where I want to end their strategy, where I want to start is with free agency.
Okay.
Because I'm really excited about it. We just did some cap numbers that we'll talk to you guys about. And it actually got me more optimistic than I was even last night in our live show. So before we talk about numbers, this is really what I'm referencing when I'm mentioning what Eric talked about. He was asked about free agency, and DeCosta, quoting Jeff Zrebiec, our guy, said on Twitter that Eric DeCosta said team will make moves to free up cap space within next couple of weeks. Said he will be talking to agents this week. So that means two things to me, Glenn: extensions and cap casualties.
Yep.
Right. So let's talk about what they can do from a numbers standpoint, and I think we can hype the people up. Talk about a few guys that have been chirping about the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is, on the outset, when you look at, especially when you look at like the whole AFC North, it looks like the Ravens are, they're definitely the most hamstrung by the cap as of right now. When you look around the AFC North, of course, the Bengals have like 50 some million in cap space, and the Ravens are all the way down at the bottom, currently just 8.4 million in available space. But the good news is there's some obvious moves they could make to increase some of that space. And the first spot you got to start at, and DeCosta was asked about about this player today and said that there's been no discussions to this point about his future, and that's tackle Alejandro Villanueva. So he was a guy that caught a lot of grief this season with how he played the failed transition to right tackle. Then of course didn't get much of a shot to even give it a chance over there because he was quickly moved back to left with Ronnie going out, and he certainly had his struggles there. Had a couple good games, the Chiefs game being one of them, but outside of a couple of bright spots, it was a pretty tough year for Alejandro. They can save $6 million if they get rid of him, Jimbo.
I mean, that's not chump change, and certainly I would say we were talking about Lamar's contract being a formality, previous to some of the recent scuttlebutt, if you will. But this, for sure, I see as a foregone conclusion. I think that the Ravens make this move, free up the $6 million in cap, and Alejandro Villanueva goes off into the sunset, having made a lot more money than he initially expected. One of the things I'll say about Alejandro is he said, if you remember in his presser when he came on board, that his whole goal was to get a team to pay him enough money to pay for his MBA when he realized that he was an NFL prospect. So being an undrafted guy and making the money he has, had the career he has, is nothing but he can be nothing but proud of himself and what he's done. So yeah, I think that's a done deal, don't you think?
Yeah, it's just the end of the road. He had a great career, obviously had a great career in the military before he even started his career in the NFL. But last year, and maybe even the year before that, the signs were that it was time to hang it up. So
you got one more kicker, one more bump right out the door. Here's your envelope full of cash. Have a great life type thing.
Yeah, and he certainly, he had to earn it this year, maybe more than others, as far as the fact that his skills at this point have fallen off, and he was probably on the receiving end of some tough games, more so than in years past where he was maybe doling out some beatings up on the front offensive line. So Villanueva's gone. We see that, but who else is an obvious move that they could create some more space, Jimbo?
Yeah, I think another guy that, to me, while he had a relatively healthy season, I think it's also almost as much of a foregone conclusion as Alejandro Villanueva, maybe not quite as much, but Tavon Young we would save, if I'm not mistaken,
Mm-hmm.
$5.8 million in cap space by flat out cutting him pre-June 1st. And so I think the Ravens do that and let him test the market. Now, he's a guy different than Alejandro where I can see him back in the fold, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly on a much different number. The Ravens will be more than happy to let him go out there and test the market, see what he gets. If the Jets want to pay him a ton of money, if the Jags or the Giants or, who else wants to pay him a ton of money, then have at it.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly if the Ravens, Eric talked about, like you mentioned, evaluating players' value. So if they consider the value there, I could see them re-signing him. But I think that's another one that's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah. Either a cut
Or
or
a
a
massive restructure, right?
exact. Well, an extension
Right.
makes his cap because right now he's got a $9.1 million cap hit. No way they enter the season under that. And now so that just those two guys would get him almost to 12 million in additional cap space. Now they would incur about 6.5 million in dead money. So it's not like that this money is just free and clear and there's no penalty for cutting these guys. There is a penalty that the Ravens are going to have to incur if they decide to make these moves. But sometimes you got to accept some dead money if you want to clear out some space.
Yep.
But the next few guys are interesting because these next three guys are still on, or I say these next two guys, I should say, are still on their rookie deals, which is something that at least in the past that this would never be even a discussion. But as of recently, they've shown that they will part ways with draft picks earlier than they ever used to, especially if they're underperforming in their position and they're strapped for cash. So, Jimmy, how likely is it that they look and they see Miles Boykin and Ben Powers together? They could save $5 million between them, so it's 2.5 between each of them, and only incur a little under, what's this, 400,000, a little under 400,000 in dead money, which in this, to us, it's like, wow, 400,000. But when it comes to the cap, that is pocket change. So do you see a scenario where they look and say, we need that 5 million in additional space and we're willing to part ways with Boykin and Powers to make it happen?
So to answer both your questions, yes and yes. But as far as do I see a scenario? Yes. And do I see it happening and the Ravens seriously considering it? Yes, as well. So even though, like you said, it's a bit of a rarity this early on in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
However, one thing that Eric DeCosta has done, if I'm not mistaken, he's selected the most players, like he's had the most draft picks since I think he's taken over as the GM, if I'm not mistaken. So with that being said, there'll be some natural trends that will start. This could be the start of that. And so I think the most likely or the more likely of the two is Miles Boykin, in my opinion, because of the depth of the wide receiver position and the lack of production on his end, where Powers at least has had at this point, double-digit games starting, has shown that he's enough in the run game.
You had to think of that word carefully, didn't you?
Like, I mean, he's enough, right? Like, he's not,
Well, he's someone that if you had to count on for a game or two, you'd feel okay about it because of his experience.
Right, exactly. So he's sufficient, but certainly not a guy you
not a starter.
Right. But the reason I think that he has a better chance to hang around is because a guy like Ben Cleveland really hasn't shown, one, that he can stay healthy, shown, two, enough game tape to where the team feels comfortable in his health or his ability on the field. Yeah. So that's why I think maybe Ben Powers has a better chance of hanging around. But what do you think about those two?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you said it perfectly there. Miles Boykin has really shown you nothing to make you feel like you have to keep him on this roster. And it is a wide receiver position that is extremely young and talented. So why I don't see the need to keep Miles Boykin around when you consider Hollywood's here, Bateman, Duvernay, Prochet, and now Tylan Wallace added to the mix. And if you were going to add to that room, I think you would do so with a veteran, even though I think that's less necessary this year than it was last year or the year before. So I think I just don't see where Miles Boykin fits in on that group. Yeah, he's a special teamer, but you never want to see him out there on offense. And I think you could you could find some special teams help elsewhere on the team. So yeah, I think he's gone. And Ben Powers, the way Ben Powers would be gone is if they feel good about the fact that Tyree Phillips can now be a backup guard and not be so relied upon to be a tackle on top of things. Because if Ben Cleveland is to get hurt again, or if he's just not playing up to the quality, I don't think they want to put Makari in as left guard because they want to keep him as that floating, sixth guy. So I think that Powers has a better shot, but if Tyree Phillips can show some growth, which for some reason they are still so high on Tyree Phillips, even though we really haven't seen a ton from him, I think Tyree could be the answer for left guard if Ben Cleveland isn't able to take the job.
Yeah, I think Tyree, what you see, at least obviously he can't stay healthy, so like that's number one.
Yeah.
But if you can, I think it's just the athleticism he has at that size, and I think he's still learning so much because he's so young in the game. So I think that's what they're hopeful of, right?
Right.
So that'll definitely be interesting to see. Out with just those 4 moves, just doing those 4 things outside of extensions and anything else you can possibly think of. The Ravens would be up to around $25 million, I think a little over in cap space. Now, with the dead money penalty, we haven't equated that in yet. But total dead money you said is what, 6.8?
Yeah.
Yeah. So call it 19 million.
And they have very low. They only have 760 right now total. So you add 6.8 to it, and they're about 7.5 total dead money going.
Right. So you're in the high teens. So, you're comfortably in the high teens then, right?
What do you mean high teens of what?
In the money that they have available to them.
Well, you're at 16.8 in created space, but you already have 8.
Oh, right. And then you're at the 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long day. I didn't sleep from 1 to 5 this morning. So compliments to Henry. Thank you. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So 25, I think you said this before we turn the cameras on, Glenn, you can do a thing or two with that.
You can do some things with 25. You could certainly go out and get a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who's been linked to the Ravens like crazy and seems to like the idea of possibly joining the purple and black. And, this isn't something like the Ravens. They already showed interest in this guy. So we know the Ravens at least liked him a couple years back when they tried to get him and ultimately ended up with Earl Thomas, which we know how that went. But I do think that there's a shot they could pull the trigger on a guy like that. Now, does it mean they can, go out and just sign, anybody? Like if Zadarius Smith wants to come in and get $16 million, I don't think that you've created enough space that you feel comfortable throwing that kind of scratch around. But it's certainly possible. Chandler Jones, I believe they're saying that he's not going to be retained in Arizona. So look out for that. So it gives you some more flexibility in that you could go out if you believe that this is the guy that could make the difference. I think you could go get him.
How old is Chandler Jones? I feel he's been around for a long time, but he's not really that old.
Right. Yeah, he's not. Now, the question is, how does he fit in the system? I think he played in New England, which they run 32. A very similar system. Okay, 32.
I don't even care what system he's in. That dude can get after the quarterback.
The dude is just a pass rusher.
Yeah.
I mean,
he had 5 sacks in a game last year. He would be our second leading, right?
In one game.
Tied with Odafe Owe.
Yeah.
For second in the team in sacks in 4 quarters of football. It's
crazy.
Against a guy while coming off an injury, against a guy who's been a Pro Bowler. If I'm not mistaken, Taylor Lewan's even had an All-Pro season.
Oh, he has.
So I mean, and I mean, he made him look like doo-doo.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's been doing that since he's gotten in the league, right? He's always had monster season after monster season. So if they can make it work, yeah, that'll be a welcome sight. Now they could also create a little more space, Jimbo. What
you got for me?
Yeah, they got some opportunities with, first of all, Marcus Peters is a big one. Marcus Peters, we do not want to see Marcus Peters gone. Let me just state
Especially
that.
After last year. No way.
No way. Big time Marcus Peters fans here, and we do not want to see him gone. So we are certainly not suggesting that they cut Marcus Peters and pick up that $10 million in cap savings. However, he is slated to cost 15.5 against the cap. So what are your thoughts on them reaching an extension with Marcus just to lower that cap number and keep him here in Baltimore for a couple more years?
Yes, and yes. I mean, Marcus Peters is a gamer. He is a winner. He is a producer. Like, I love everything about Marcus Peters' game. I love everything about his game in purple and black. Like, he is a Raven if I've ever seen one. And I want him here for a long time. So we don't need a locker room full of choir boys. Not that he's like some terrible human either. I'm sure he's a great dude.
He's got some dog in him.
Exactly. From a personality standpoint, he wants nothing but the best. And he's not against vocalizing how he feels.
Yep.
And you need that. So yes, I want Marcus Peters here for the long term. It makes sense for him and the Ravens, especially because I think McDonald's defense is not going to change dramatically on the back end. I think that they're going to still be called upon to play the same type of man-to-man type coverage. So, his value will be even higher there. So yes, and yes. I don't see any downside to this. Do you?
No, not whatsoever. Unless they see something from a rehab standpoint that makes them think he's not able to get back to where he was. But
would they ever cut him and let him test the market and then let that set the bar and then say, well, we'll pay you that?
I guess, but I wonder what that would mean for the dead money,
and the relationship.
Yeah, I don't think they want to burn that bridge.
Especially a guy that is very emotional. Like Marcus Peters thrives off of emotion. You don't want to rock that boat.
No, and let's be honest, what more could you ask from Marcus Peters since he's been in Baltimore?
Right.
He's balled out. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler in his first season, was a difference maker in that first season, and outside of him getting hurt, before last year, he's been spectacular here as a Raven. So I think he'll I don't see the negative in extending him unless you see something from the medicals saying that he can't return to normal. And then the last guy I want to talk about is a guy that we're high on we have high hopes for this guy, and that's Juwan James, who was signed here to be potentially the right tackle in 2022 if all things go well in his return from the Achilles tear he had last spring, which we're approaching a year removed from that injury. So. But if let's say the Ravens go out and they take a tackle in the first round, or they take maybe even another tackle in the fourth round or third round,
sure.
And Juwan James shows in camp that he's just not back to the Juwan James. He's taken a lot of time off. He took time off when the COVID year struck, and then he got hurt and missed an entire season. So he hasn't played in a long, long time. And if they don't see that he's got the ability to get back to the quality of play he had before the injury and before the COVID year, they could save $3 million by releasing Juwan James and only incur $250,000 in dead money. So that's kind of like a back pocket move that they could always pull out. It's like, the low risk, high reward.
Right. If Chandler Jones, he's a couple extra mil, right? Like,
sorry, Juwan.
Yeah. Just kind of how it is. But at the same time, being that pre or post June 1st, knowing that number is the same, they can also ride it out and say, well, let's see what this guy's got. We'll give him as much time as we can. And then if he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. Now, that also limits you, not only him in the market, but limits you as far as who's available out there. But still, it's an opportunity for you to at least really kick the tires and see what he's got going on, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You give him as much chance as you can. However, the Ravens typically do like to treat players correctly and don't want to, drag it out and then cut them on the last day when opportunities elsewhere are all gobbled up.
Right. But the Ravens, I think, were the only ones calling back then.
They were. They were, especially. So maybe that gives them a little bit more leeway.
Right.
Because they took a chance on him. Let's be honest. Nobody else did, and the Ravens did. So those are all the moves that we can see just right off break.
Buckle your seatbelt.
No doubt, because this is an important year, and maybe I think Eric DeCosta is probably feeling more pressure this year than even his first year taking over the reins from Ozzie Newsome, who is a Hall of Famer as a GM.
Don't get nervous because I'm here now.